you check the children. Show a little match sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes. That is what
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird, and we're here today to do something very special. We get to do an interview with someone that actually was a very large contribution, or had a very large contribution to Dylan's New Nightmare. All Freddy movies rest on how good Freddy is or isn't, as far as fan films and the full Hollywood features go, a lot of times, for a lot of people anyway. And this gentleman is part of the reason why our Neo-Freddy look is what I call it behind the scenes, but our Freddy for Dylan's New Nightmare, played by Dave McCrae, part of why he looks so awesome is because of this gentleman's work. So everyone, welcome please Mikey Rotella to the channel. Welcome, Mikey.
What's everybody? How's it going, Cecil? Good to see you.
Good to see you as well,
excited
sir.
to be here. Yeah, awesome job on the movie. I haven't seen the whole thing yet, but from all the buzz that everyone's freaking out about, from Mad Monster and everything, it's probably going to be amazing. So
I am excited for you to see it. Honestly, I want you to see how your work came into motion. So specifically, we'll get to your sculpting work on Dylan's New Nightmare in good turn. But whenever I have someone on here to do an interview, I always start off asking them, what was your first experience that you can remember with the horror genre?
wow, that's a hard one. That's I always go back, and I don't know if this is my first real memory. I'm sure I've got some repressed stuff back there somewhere in my the caverns of my brain, which is a pretty scary place. But
I've seen your monsters. I don't doubt it.
yeah. One of the earliest things I definitely can remember was I saw The Exorcist at an obscenely young age, maybe 7 years old, 7 or 8, and the whole idea is that my dad's a pretty big Catholic, so he thought it was almost like a good way to kind of shield myself from the realities of demonic possession is to watch this movie, because it does have some things that some people believe are actually true. I don't personally believe that stuff, but as a kid, it kind of splintered my psyche a little bit. I was so horrified by that movie, and the fact that my family kind of believed that was some sort of possibility, it messed me up pretty good, so that was pretty early on, and it sort of became this kind of thing where every time I would watch a horror movie or something, I would be so scared it would ruin me, and I'd have nightmares and stuff. But that's the kind of stuff that I became obsessed with later on in life. I loved the feeling of getting scared, and I loved watching all that crazy stuff really way too young. And even though I didn't quite enjoy it at first, I was freaked out by it, but it became my kind of obsession. So
I know how that goes. It's pretty awesome, because that is generally how it goes with most horror fans, or at least people that I've had on the show. It's they saw something they probably shouldn't have at a very young age, and while it scared them, it also intrigued them enough to bring them back to that genre. And with your story in particular, that's got to be an added level, right? Where you see one of what most consider, or what many consider, one of the scariest movies of all time. R.I.P. William Friedkin, director of the film, unfortunately passed just recently.
Yeah, that's a huge loss, man. That guy was a genius.
He really was. He was a bit out there with some of his methodology regarding some of the actors he's worked with, for sure. So, but he was undoubtedly a genius, and The Exorcist in particular. Yeah, if you watch that, that's scary enough on its own. But if you live in a family where they're also by the way, that shit can happen, that only compounds it even more. It's not I don't watch Jaws. Because Jaws 2 was my first experience. I didn't talk to my family about it, and they weren't by the way, there are sharks in the pool, so beware. It's that's an added level of fuckery with someone's mind, I would say.
Oh, for sure. But that little element of fear that when you did go to the beach, there might be, a shark there. Jaws ruined, millions and millions of people's lives, basically. I remember having a hard time taking a bath for a while because I'd concoct these weird ideas that a baby shark could swim up the the pipes or something into my house and then somehow grow eating like feces and whatnot in the pipes. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's like, and
That's
then one day,
that's pretty deep thought about it.
yeah, it was pretty sick. I need to burst through the base of the the toilet or or the bathtub. I was a psycho. So Jaws messed me up pretty good too.
I
And
feel that, yeah.
yeah. Oh, I mean, there's so many movies. We were a big video rental family, so we'd rent stuff all the time, and I'd rent stuff just off of box art, as we all did, right? And I rented so many things that would later just kind of traumatize me. And then we got cable pretty early on. I was probably like 9 or 10. And we already had HBO and stuff like that, and so we're getting all this stuff kind of pumped into the house, and I had all these little things that would like little even just scenes that I'd have nightmares about and not even realize what movie they were from till way later into my adulthood. Then you see something, you're like, holy, I remember that. I had nightmares about that for years.
That's
So
such a cool experience, though, when you think about it, like ultimately, because it's making connections in your brain, and it's like, oh my God. And as you get older, you realize that it's movies, and then you're like, oh, damn, how did they do that? Or at least this is the way my mind worked about it. And so I just got more and more intrigued, not just with watching the movies, but like, how are these things done? And I loved I loved growing up as DVDs and Blu-rays became more and more popular because of the special features and like all of the behind the scenes docs and everything. I mean, if I can afford it, like I would love to make our Dylan's New Nightmare Blu-ray a double disc, just because we have so many special features that I would love to put out there, and it just won't all fit on one Blu-ray. But yeah, I mean, it's so that's great. And so I wanted to ask, so how did how did your love of the genre evolve from there? Like, did you start gravitating towards specific subgenres within the horror overall genre?
well, pretty early on, like right after basically I was kind of traumatized, I saw Thriller. So the Thriller video comes out, right? And the making of Thriller, which is kind of the precursor to all the special feature stuff on laser discs and then DVDs and everything else, Blu-ray. That kind of like primed the whole world for that behind the scenes look at makeup effects. And Thriller got me excited about American Werewolf in London because they cover John Landis and Rick Baker and stuff so much in the making of. So I, asked my dad again, who was like the harbinger of my doom. I'm like, can we rent that movie, that werewolf movie? He's like, yeah, I've seen it. It's pretty great, but and my dad was crazy. He'd like cover my eyes for the sex scenes in the porno theater, but I was allowed to watch the werewolf like rip Jack to shreds, basically, which is hilarious. So I remember we rented American Werewolf and I watched it and I lost my mind. And now I had this kind of like background on Rick Baker creating that werewolf and who John Landis was as the director and everything. And so I could go back between, Thriller, the video, I could go to American Werewolf, and I could go back to the making of and just kind of cross-reference everything, and I've kind of like put it all together as a super young kid. Like, I want to do that part. I want to do the rubber monster part, and just to be a part of that and work with directors like yourself and stuff like that and make a cool film or story and something come to life. I was kind of nuts. And another kind of precursor to all the special feature stuff was like Lights, Camera, Action and Movie Magic and those shows that were like big at that time. And I was so young that when something like that was on, I wanted to see that stuff. And I started to kind of ease my mind about like the reality of the horror. I was like, okay, well, I know these people are building this stuff now. I know what they're making it out of. It's foam, and different types of rubber. And I'm like, I want to be a part of that somehow. And that's kind of what got me into that. Later on was when I really started getting into like the more kind of gritty, like 70s stuff. I like a lot of like Italian, like zombie stuff and, Fulci and a lot of the Giallo stuff and all that stuff. I that's when I started kind of evolving into really understanding kind of story and cinematography and stuff and being kind of obsessed with those aspects of it too. Dawn of the Dead was a huge one for me. It was like, I love Romero and I love Night of the Living Dead, but I was probably a little too young to really grasp what was going on there. But Dawn of the Dead was one of those ones that scared the hell out of me, and the tone of it, the score, everything really scared me. and kind of brought me into that, like, yo, check out all this stuff coming from Europe, what's up with that stuff, so I was
That's cool.
into that. Yeah.
So then you saw with the werewolf stuff. Okay, I want to do that. So like, how did that progress for you? Did you like decide, okay, I want to go to a school for it, or did you just start messing with stuff on your own? Like, how did you first start actually putting your hands into the mix?
Well, I started mostly just drawing like every artistic kid does, like just drawing constantly and getting in trouble in school for drawing when I should be doing my work, And by high school, I was starting to sculpt and stuff, starting to pick up clay and mess around with that. I still didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to make monsters. I didn't know how to do that or what that was going to look like. But, I grew up with my dad's a teacher, so my family, they had a really kind of hard-nosed look at, like, you got to get a degree, so I just thought, okay, I'll go to art school after high school, and then I can do my thing and still get my degree and be protected in, out there in the scary world, which actually wound up being a little bit of a waste of money, but you know how those things work. It's kind of crazy. It was good for me to kind of just grow up a little bit, become more of an adult. So I was sculpting a lot. I was, just watching tons of movies, drawing constantly. I hadn't really got into like the mask making process till probably I was like 18, 19. And that's when I was going out to, I went to the Art Institute of Philadelphia, and I studied industrial design technology because that was the only thing that really had a 3D element at the time.
Huh.
So we were doing everything from, designing vacuum cleaners and furniture design, and then like this little sort of minor in like mask making and special effects. And yeah, they do this stuff in the movies, but we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on product design. And I was like, I don't want to do that stuff, but at least I got my degree. I started, sculpting more, getting more serious about art. And then after that, because I really didn't have any real idea of how to get there, especially growing up in New Jersey, which is where I'm from. So I couldn't get any further from California, and Hollywood and all that stuff. So I went to Savini School in Pennsylvania after that. So
Gotcha.
now I'm like stacking, more student loans on top of student loans, basically to do a thing that most people learned in their garage, but
Right.
I was that kind of kid. I was sort of the late bloomer trying to figure it all out. But Nora's a Savini alum too,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's like, all these really great talented people came from that place, which is awesome. And that was another opportunity for me to get just a little closer to Hollywood, working with some people like Jerry Gergely, who's, a credible makeup artist, worked for John Volich, and did a bunch of stuff in the 90s at Optic Nerve Studios. And now I'm getting to actually work next to him at school and learn from him. And that's like, all right, well, this guy was out there. He did it in Hollywood. He knows what's up, the ins and outs. And he didn't pull any punches telling us what we're going to deal with when we get out there. So that was really valuable, and it was kind of hard to see it at the time, but looking back, I'm like, I'm glad I did these steps. So by the time I actually did go all the way out to LA, I was like, a decent artist. I wasn't good, but I kind of knew like the ropes of everything. And I was at least mature enough that I wasn't going to get out to Hollywood and start partying and being an asshole and getting crazy. So I was just like right into the shops. What can I do? I'll sweep floors, I'll clean toilets, whatever I got to do,
Okay.
just to get in. So that was kind of lucked out there. And then it was just pushing for the sculpting department because that was kind of my love, and that was like my favorite thing to do.
So you basically did the makeup effects equivalent of a would-be actor, right? That would come out, not have anything lined up, but just like, hey, I want to make it out here. So you didn't have necessarily a job for you when you went out there?
No, I did have names. I had a few phone numbers. Luckily, I had some friends that had come out, mostly from school and stuff, that were already out here. Some of them were working, and then it's just like, hey man, I think they need another guy in the mold shop, or they need another whatever. And then you're just passing around and you're just jumping from gig to gig, just trying to get noticed. And if people like having you around enough and you don't screw up that much, you start getting the calls back. And
Nice.
then, I just kept showing everybody sculptures and showing like, hey, I did this, I want to sculpt. And everyone kind of laughs at you at first. They're like, yeah, everybody wants to get in the art department. We get it. And then eventually it's like you do a couple jobs for free, and it's like, okay, I'll do that, I do what I got to do. But I would be working like 8 to 10 hour days in the mold shop at some shop, whatever shop would have me at the time, and then going home and sculpting and trying to make masks and stuff at night. So just trying to get better and better. And then eventually somebody let me sculpt. They're like, yeah, you can sculpt this, and you know what? We'll even pay you for this one. And then it's like, all right, I'm in the sculpting department. This is nuts, And then from there, it's like, you just keep going and rolling. And I started to get kind of known as a sculptor then. And then I was like, okay, I'm lucky. I got here. And now I just got to just keep getting better, basically.
That's awesome. So what was the first, like, what do you consider your first, like, big noteworthy piece that started getting you, even bigger jobs and things like that? Like, was there one that was like, yeah, man, when that happened, that opened a lot more doors for me, or anything like that? Or was it just a gradual process that just happened naturally?
It was pretty slow and steady for a long time there. And how the filmmaking process works. Like, you do something and it may end up on the cutting room floor. You do something and you think it's going to be a hero piece. It winds up being background. You do something that is supposed to be background and winds up getting on camera and looks terrible. Like, I mean, there's all kinds of ins and outs stuff that kind of trip you up along the way. But I never really got anything that really kind of put me on the map, because I was always sort of supporting all the other sculptors that I looked up to and the guys that were kind of my heroes. But that was my thing, is I'm like working next to them. So it wasn't like the whole industry or the whole world sees something and goes, oh, this dude is here now. He like made it. It's like a slow progression where you're working next to these guys, and then they go, hey, we need a good guy that we can count on. Bring this guy in. We've worked with him before. And then the first time anyone even really let me like touch clay, like, on the clock, which is kind of nuts, was on Cabin in the Woods, which was a big deal for me. And that was, we were building that stuff 2 years before the film came out, because I got all, kind of bogged down in all the MGM stuff, so it came out actually way later. So I think it was like 2009 when I was working on it. And I'm working for Dave Anderson. I got to meet Heather Langenkamp, for the first time, which was pretty sick, because that's his wife, and she's there. She would hand out our paychecks with the Freddy glove on. It was like the coolest thing ever.
That's
like,
awesome.
As a nerd, I was like freaking out. But her husband Dave is like one of the greatest makeup artists on the planet, and one of the best people to work for. The two of them are like angels. But his father Lance is a legend. Like, he worked on John Carpenter's The Thing and stuff like that. And like, he's like just a legend in the business. They literally call him the Ledge, because he's kind of a living legend, right? And so I was sort of tasked with following him around and just helping him out. And I was doing everything, just making molds and cleaning molds and, whatever. But he actually was like, hey, can you sculpt? And I'm like, well, kinda, nobody lets me, but I want to, So he's like, all right, well, we got to do this unicorn. So there's this evil unicorn, in Cabin in the Woods, and he gives me, the horn basically to do. So he's like, you just start blocking this thing out, and I'll come over and finish it when you get to a point. I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm just excited someone's letting me touch clay, and he kept coming over, and like, yeah, cool, I like that, and then leaving. And I kept thinking he's going to take it from me, and he just left me alone. I wound up finishing it. So in my head, I'm like, holy shit, I finished something. It's going to be in like a legit movie. Then they brought out the form for the horse, and we started sculpting on the actual horse head, me and him. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm working with Lance Anderson here. This is nuts. And we're sculpting together. So I can call myself a sculptor in some way, even though I really wasn't yet. I was just doing what they let me do. But that was kind of a big deal to me,
Hell
then, yeah. Then later on, I worked for Joel Harlow, and that was on Star Trek Beyond. And I had gotten a few sculpting gigs in between there. Like this, definitely had kind of established myself as like a low guy on the totem pole for the sculpting department, which was cool. But on that show, I got to work with Norman Cabrera, Matt Rose, legends, Joey Orozco, Miles Tevis. I mean, these guys are like the guys I grew up like reading about in, Cinemagic or like Fangoria or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was freaking out. Richie Alonso and just Joel Harlow himself, who's an unbelievable artist in every way. So I'm like working next to these guys, and then I'm like, whoa, like I can hang with these guys. Like they're way light years ahead of me. You know, they've got 15, 20 years in the business, you know, before me, but they respect me, and like, you know, these guys, they don't mind that I'm hanging out. So after that, it was like those guys would mention me, and that was it. It's like, all right, well, if you're cool with Norman Cabrera, you know, or you're cool with Miles Tevis, you come right in, you know. So that was pretty sweet.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. Was there so? It's actually a good segue into some of the things that I saw on the IMDb. Now, again, I know it's not always the most accurate, but if there are specific things that you got to touch or whatever, or that you had a hand in creating in some of these, I was curious as to what they would be. Like, because I saw the Cabin in the Woods thing, and I was like, Jesus, there's a whole menagerie of things he could have worked on there. So I was curious about that. So you already answered that one. But I've watched so much of the things you worked on, like the most recent Anne Rice adaptations, Interview and Mayfair Witches. Yeah. So it said you did some work on that. What kind of work did you do on those?
Yeah, you know, it's pretty cool just to be connected to Anne Rice stuff at all. You know, the thing I'm working at K&B right now, so K&B Effects Group, you know, Greg Nicotero, Howard Berger, you know, that place, I've been wanting to work there since I was, you know, 10 years old. So I, you know, finally got in there, and we got those Anne Rice series. We got Interview with the Vampire and the Mayfair Witches at the same time, which was pretty cool. And we were all excited, but it also, you know, Interview, it's not too much effects work. Like, it's a lot of gore, which is cool, and you know, we have tons of that stuff, and that's always fun to do. And then, you know, we had some teeth caps and stuff for so there wasn't like a ton to do. Gotcha. So I kept like hoping, like, when are we gonna do more? We need to do more. But you know, we did a lot of gore stuff, torn out throat, you know, decapitated heads, like all kinds of stuff.
That torso on the gate. Maybe.
Yeah, tons of that stuff, you know. And it's weird because at K&B, it's like there's like an assembly line. Like, they just throw stuff on your desk and you just finish it and it goes out, and it's like, you know, it's the next department. Sometimes you don't even know what it is. Like, it's funny, you know, at the end of every week, we're all asking each other, hey, what was that for? Because we have to put it all on our time card, you know. Like, I don't even know what, you know, what we should budget that as, or what we should put that on, because it's just so much stuff. And so we did a ton of gore stuff for that. I'm hoping we get to do even more stuff for the upcoming seasons, and it'll just get like more and more and more elaborate. Mayfair Witches, I got the opportunity to do probably one of the coolest projects I've ever done, which is cool. Is there was this, I think in the first episode even, there was this kind of morph scene where I'm not sure completely about the characters and stuff, but there's this one guy who he literally like shape shifts like in camera, you know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We did this cool puppet head that was like 3 of the actors' faces sort of stretching out of one, like looks like it's made of bubble gum or something. Definitely an homage to The Thing, like the Rob Bottin stuff in The Thing. Mm-hmm. So that's basically it. Like, you know, Howard Berger came over and he was like, hey, this is what we have to do. It's sort of got to be like The Thing. Here are pictures of the actor, and you just kind of go for it. You know, there was real rough designs from John Wheaton in the design room, but we were so bogged down that we didn't really have enough time for him to really flesh anything out. So I kind of got to do a lot of designing on that, which is like my favorite, because usually we get incredible designs from people that are way more talented at that than us, but every once in a while we get to design ourselves, like in the clay, which is like the most fun thing ever. That's like the dream, you know. So that was one of those opportunities. I'm just like throwing clay around and going nuts, and you know, we're going back and forth with production to see if they're down and they like it. And they liked it the whole way. Like, there was really no notes that took it off, you know, off track. So that was awesome. The problem is, as you know, when you get down to this stuff, you cut it up, visual effects cover some stuff up, and then whatever happens, it turned into sort of like a morph thing, like almost like a 90s style, like morph, you know, that was, you know, didn't really showcase the puppet that we did, which actually, you know, had movements and stuff to it, and it was like really intricate and cool. So that, of course, becomes a little bit of a bummer when that happens. But to me, just personally, it was such a cool job, and to have those finished pieces. I posted some pictures on my Instagram page, and I'm just like, that to me, that's like the biggest deal when you get an opportunity like that to do something cool. So
Yeah, I'll make sure the link is in the description box for any of you guys that want to go check out Mikey's work on his Instagram. Is the Instagram the best place, or is there somewhere else that would be good for them to visit as well?
I mean, Instagram's probably the best. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Cool.
So
Well, you did mention the thing, and it got me curious because I did also see that you, well, at least listed was the Thing 2011 and Harbinger Down. And I don't know if a lot of people know, but at least the rumor, or I don't know about rumor, but what I've heard is that the Thing 2011 did originally have a lot of practical pieces that they then basically, like you said, they just did VFX instead. And then I heard that a lot of those pieces were then repurposed for Harbinger Down. I don't know if that's actually true, but I saw the two and I was like, so maybe Mikey worked on something for the Thing and it was one of those repurposed pieces. So please, am I wrong? Am I totally off on that?
no, you're actually right on the money. Especially like idea wise, when Alec Gillis at ADI, when we were doing the Thing 2011, we were all so kind of disappointed that a lot of the stuff didn't make it on screen, or it didn't make it untouched. And we had all this cool stuff. It sort of, I think it really kind of sparked the idea to do Harbinger Down. He was like, well, I want to do my own film where I can showcase this type of stuff. And I don't know that we actually repurposed anything specifically from that build, but we did like use a lot of the same techniques and stuff that to go right into that stuff. And then they dipped into the archive of molds, going all the way back, to just find little things and piece them together, because that was a low budget movie, so they really had to like stretch that money. And so I actually did get to come in and do some original stuff for Harbinger Down also, though, which was
awesome.
Cool. Again, a lot of that stuff doesn't always make it, to the final print. So it's like, it is what it is. But we had these kind of cool, like, microscopic tardigrade little creature monsters, that I sculpted. I sculpted a beluga whale, two different scale beluga whales, like a full scale head, and then a little mini puppet to be used in there. And we sculpted tons of tentacles and all kinds of stuff, and just went wild on that. And there were some gore effects and stuff on that too that we got to work on. But it was cool because, Alec is like one of the coolest guys I've ever worked for, and I was at ADI for a long time. I kind of like came up like through the ranks there, and then was able to sculpt. Actually, 2011, the Thing prequel was the first time I got to be in the sculpting department, like legitimately at ADI. So that was a big deal to get the phone call, like, hey, come over and actually sculpt. I was like, get out of here. You guys are going to finally let me sculpt, And I got to come over, and, there were so many badasses on that too. I was like, it was a big deal to work with all these great people. But we were so excited to be attached to that franchise, just attached to the Carpenter Thing in any way, shape, or form, because that's every effects nerd's like #1 movie, basically, like, and it's an amazing film anyway, without even the effects. But we were so excited, and we did all this really cool stuff. We were excited about that stuff. And then by the time the movie comes out, you don't know what is going to make it, like we said. But also, personally, and this is just my own opinion, I thought the movie was terrible. On top of it, it was like, oh, God, like the story and, just the way it plays out. It's like, this is offensive to me as a fan, not only as a guy who worked on it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think it's been long enough that I can say that, though. At this point, it's like, man, it was kind of crushing. But that was sort of like one of those wake up call moments, in your career where it's like, look, man, it's not going to be perfect. You're here, you're doing this. This is the business, and you got to take the small victories. So I was glad to be a part of it in any way, but I always say, like, all my dreams have come true in my career, but just in like the worst way possible. You know what I mean? Like you got to work on the Thing prequel from 2011. It's like whatever.
Well, you've got some big ones on here. Let me just throw off a few, and if you have anything in particular about each of or any of them, Because I saw Kong Skull Island, the new version of It, The Predator, the new Hellboy, which I thought had a lot of really fun creatures in it. And then the Tomorrow War. I don't know if you got to work on those creatures. Those things were badass. So, the new Hellraiser. There's just so much that you've worked on that I'm curious about. So, any of those that you want to touch on, and what you did in them.
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird because it's kind of all over the gamut, like all over the board. Like, some of those gigs I literally worked on like the smallest little thing. I had some little task to do, but I was glad to be attached in any way possible. Some things I worked on, way bigger projects, and even like Hellboy, you mentioned, I got to go on set in Bulgaria. So that's very rare for like a shop rat like me. Like they usually keep me in the sculpting room, and I don't, really get to leave much, but I got a cool opportunity to go all the way to Bulgaria and shoot at New Boyana Studios, in Sofia, Bulgaria, which was nuts. So Joel Harlow brought me out there, and I was able to actually do some puppeteering and stuff, and be on set and doing makeup and all kinds of crazy stuff, which was definitely different and cool for me because I've done those things, but I don't get that opportunity very often. So that was a really big deal. Like I got to work on the Grugach like pig monster that Doug Tate played,
Nice.
and I helped sculpt some parts of that creature. That was Norman Cabrera was heading that thing up, which again, he's like my hero. So, I mean, that guy is amazing. And we actually got to go to Bulgaria together and puppeteer like on it, which was nuts. And suit Doug up in the suit every day and all that stuff. And it was just like wild to be a part of that. And then you have those like moments where you're like, dude, movie magic. This is it. Like, this is what we were talking about when we were kids,
Yeah.
So that was pretty great opportunity. But Tomorrow War, you mentioned, which was another cool thing. But like I said, it's a tiny little chunk of that was I got to, while I was, working at K&B during the day, I was moonlighting at Spectral Motion at night. My buddy Wayne Anderson was heading up that creature. And he was like, yo, we're pulling doubles. So if you want to come over here at night, and a lot of times we just got to hustle because, money is scarce and these jobs don't, come along that much. So you want to take an opportunity to be in something cool. He told me it was a really cool monster. I was excited. I'm like, yeah, I'll come by. So I would be there from 4 to 10 every night, and then have to do the whole thing over again the next day. Like, it was kind of crazy. So it's like working double duty, but I got to work a lot on the body,
Nice.
like everyone's, sculpting all the other pieces, and we're putting together this huge, massive body. And it was like full size, animatronic. I mean, I think the thing had like 6 legs or something crazy like that. It was
That's
wild.
awesome.
And Spectral Motion, they're known for their animatronics. They have Mark Zatrakian, with the guy's like a literal like genius. He's like the Oppenheimer of like of makeup effects and animatronics. But this dude, he made this thing like was a complete finished character. Like it could move and stuff, and mouth open and close, eyes blinking, all kinds of crazy stuff. Again, you don't see the practical really shining in the movie because it's the scope is so huge that they're like, all right, well, we need 500 of these things. And it's like, okay, well, we can't make 500 animatronic puppets. It's literally impossible. So, they wind up doing the World War Z treatment on stuff, and they're like climbing over each other, and they're climbing up walls backwards and climbing over the ceiling, and it turns into this whole thing. I think it was still a cool movie, and I liked some of the concepts in there. But again, you're hoping that the subtlety, the intricacy of that puppet that took so much talent to make is really showcased like in the finished film, and it just isn't,
Mm-hmm.
So
I hear you. And then the couple of the more recent ones, and I know one that I was particularly impressed with because obviously the movie Smile got a ton of attention, and it made over $200 million on its budget and things like that. And to me, what sold that movie for me was the creature at the end, the Smile Monster, and that thing was so cool. And I loved, that it was like creeping into her mouth, and like just it's just so disturbing on a grand basis. And I didn't find out that you worked on the film until after we had done our stuff. So I was like, get the fuck out of here. He worked on that too. So between that and then the Werewolf by Night work that you did, right? I heard you did some good stuff on that too. So would you mind touching on those two things for me real quick?
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah. Smile was as much a surprise to me as it was to anyone because, again, that's just another gig. That was another thing at ADI. Alec Gillis called me up and is like, hey, we need you to come in and sculpt this thing. And again, I was moonlighting. So I'm like sleep deprived, like over caffeinated, trying to like work this thing out. And we don't know anything about the story. They don't give us like sides or the script to look over. We have no idea what this thing is going to do. So I walk into the situation and, we have, people working on makeups, people working on the full body, it's just like this dude, Anthony Stewart's doing the early version of that makeup before the mouth comes. Cause that's a whole different makeup, on top of it. And he had some really great maquettes he was doing. Then Peter Murphy, another really great sculptor, is working on this big body that's all crouched over and it's got these big crazy limbs and stuff. And I walk in and I'm like, man, this is nuts. Like, what do I do? And they hand me this design and I wish I knew the designer's name, but I think he's more of like a graphic illustrator artist. So that's why I didn't know like who had done the design. I just loved the design they handed me. I'm like, this is nuts. Like, this is actually really scary. What the hell is this? What's going on? And they're just like, just do it, just do this, and shut up and whatever. And then they kind of leave you alone. So I'm there after hours with my buddies. We're just jamming on this thing, and Davis Fandino was another great sculptor that was on that, and he was doing all like the more realistic stuff. So we always have to start at like a really nice silicone head or something, and he did some of the gore effects and stuff too. So everyone has like their specialty, and I just get this finished head. I don't know what it does. I don't know where it comes from, and I'm just working on it. And slowly with production and with Tom and Alec, we kind of figure out, okay, this is it. This is what it's going to be. It's done. And then my job's over. I leave, and then all the great artists at ADI then mold it, cast it, paint it, put it together, make sure the puppet works, all the stuff. I barely knew if it was going to be a mask or a puppet or a makeup. I didn't even really know. And all I knew was that Kevin Bacon's daughter was in the movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was called Smile. And I'm like, okay, on to the next thing. I just go. And what's wild is it didn't even come out till after, I had worked on your Freddy before, like during the pandemic, basically. And then I don't know when I got the Smile gig. I think that was after. But then the movie doesn't come out till way after, so it's like there'd be no way anyone would know I'm connected to it. And the movie, the trailer started coming out, the teaser started coming out. I'm like, wait a minute, that's that thing I worked on. Oh, cool, like awesome, like, and you have no idea what it's going to be. It's fairly low budget, so it's like okay, whatever. And then the thing like explodes on the scene. I didn't even see the movie till months after people were buzzing about it, and I'm like, I guess I should watch this thing. And finally I got to see it, and I didn't know that my face that I did was like the final like climactic form of this creature. And I was like, that is like one of the coolest reveals ever. And again, it's not on screen for very long at all.
Mm-hmm.
But that to me is much more exciting than like an over CG'd wide shot of something transforming and running up the wall and doing backflips and stuff. Is like really nice, tight, old school kind of 80s approach to like how you're shooting this thing. And I was like so happy with the way it looked. It looked amazing. I mean, ADI did an amazing job on that. So I was just so pumped about that one. And it was just sort of an accident. Like a lot of times we have no idea what we're even working on. And then it comes out, and I actually really like the movie, which is rare too, because I'm pretty hard, especially on the genre stuff. I'm like, no, I've seen it before, or I've done that, or whatever it is, whatever. So I actually really enjoyed that. That was pretty sweet.
And then the Werewolf by Night, what did you get to do in there?
Werewolf by Night was cool. I didn't work on the wolf much, but I did get to like. It's funny, we get little pieces of it. I got to sculpt his feet. You know what I mean?
Oh,
so it's like I'm sculpting these like cool like wolf feet, and I'm excited about it. And I did a couple pairs of teeth for the character and stuff. But what I was much more excited about was Man Thing, because this was like this the monster comic character that like everyone dreams of working on. You know what I mean? And they did an old Man Thing movie, I think in Australia, in the early 2000s. And that suit was really cool. The story didn't really have much to do with the comic or anything like that, but I remember like really loving that suit. But this was like our chance to do like a hardcore, like huge animatronic, like fully working suit, of Man Thing. And I got to sculpt it, which was nuts, right? And this is what I've been dreaming about my whole life. Something that's recognizable, that's like a hero character, that's basically me. Like I get to do it,
That's awesome.
And it was nuts. Luckily, the rest of the fabrication departments and the finishing departments let me be involved as well. So after I sculpted it, I was able to kind of like try to help like realize the vision like completed, with the paint departments and everything else, and like everyone kind of tweaking little things, and me just coming in and be like, yeah, we should do some more grass over here or some more vines or some more whatever. And K&B, let me kind of take sort of the lead on some of that stuff, which was cool as hell. Like I was like, blown away to get an opportunity to do that. Not just be a part of a Marvel project, but be part of a Marvel monster project.
Yeah.
So that was cool. And Michael Giacchino, was the director and awesome composer that worked on that, and he was like really involved and really interested in what we were doing. Again, though, every time there's always a little, you got to take the small victories. We got to build it, we had a blast, and then the puppet barely shows up on screen because whatever the story calls for is, it needs a lot more CG, a lot more visual effects, and they wound up, making that more of the star of the show as far as Man Thing, than what we built. But luckily we got to show some pictures of what we were making and stuff like that. And I was pretty proud of it and pretty excited about that process. But, these things happen. This is how Hollywood works.
So do you have a favorite thing that you've done of yours? Like, of all the projects that you've worked on, do you have something that really stands out, or maybe it's two things that stand out in case you can't decide, taking your babies kind of thing, that you're really particularly proud of that maybe not a lot of people know that you even had to do with?
Well, Man Thing's a big one just because of what, what I was just explaining and what that meant and how cool that was. And again, a little bit of sadness and disappointment in that, but it happens. I'm honestly most proud of like the stuff I've done kind of outside like the film world. Like I also do masks and do stuff for like Halloween haunts and stuff like that. And I really love that stuff because I get to like stretch out a little more and do my own stuff. So, I'm really proud of like some of the masks I've done, like, and they're more like high end Halloween masks. They're still wearable and stuff, but it's a chance for me to design. Like I was saying, like I don't get that opportunity a ton. So this stuff's like coming straight out of your head, and you're just coming up with fun ideas and having a good time, with that. But that stuff to me is like that's my stuff. That's not anyone else's. And you could see tons of pictures of that stuff, on my Instagram or something like that, but. I actually helped found Nightmare Force Mask, which is this awesome mask company with my buddy Josh Wazelink. And, it's his company, but we kind of founded it together, kind of came up with the idea. And some of those designs are mine. And those things are like, to me, those are like the real babies. You know what I mean? Those are like the fun things we got to do.
Heck
But I have one like to call like the all-seeing Cyclops of the Illuminati. It's like this big, ridiculous, and like almost like Molasar from the Keep meets like a Cyclops. Like it makes no sense, but just fun stuff like that. Those are the things like that's the stuff you put on your business card because you're excited about.
Right on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's cool. I mean, yeah, the stuff that's more personal to you, I mean, of course, that's going to end up being your favorite as opposed to something that maybe you only did a small piece of or something along those lines. So I totally get that. That's awesome. What project has given you the most trouble when you were putting it together, and how did that resolve?
Wow, that's a hard one because there's so much trouble. There's like a lot of trouble, Oh man, that's a hard one on the spot.
We can circle back to it if you want. Well, I mean, the other side of it is I was going to ask which one was the most fun for you to work on. So maybe if that's closer to your mind answer, we can do that one first.
Yeah, well, that's a much easier one, honestly. just because right off the top of my head, we worked on The Predator, which I forget what that was, like 2018 or something like that. But it's highly regarded as one of the worst Predator movies
I loved it.
Oh, okay, cool. That's
Yeah,
good to hear.
yeah.
That's awesome. But working on that specifically again at ADI was one of the most fun times I've ever had, just because of who I was working with. I was working with my buddies Wayne Anderson, Michael Bryan, and Tim Martin, and um, who else was there? There was a couple of other people there, but we really like we had like the best time just screwing around and having fun and just like getting tons of work done and like pulling crazy hours, but really just having fun with it. We were all huge Predator fans, growing up. Obviously, Predator is like for any creature kid, you're obsessed with that. And again, just to be part of that IP in any way, I was excited about. So here we are sculpting these, Predator bodies and heads and just going nuts and just excited every single day and just having like just fun and laughing and farting like dudes do. It's just ridiculous. Like it was like I was like pinching myself, like why are we getting paid for this stuff? This is nuts. The one, of course, there's always some kind of snafu later on. The movie comes out, and two of the Predators that we did, two of the suits, completely original to that, that specific film, are cut out of the movie because they wound up changing an entire subplot and just like cutting it from the whole movie. Edward James Olmos was actually in this little like subplot of the film, and he doesn't even show up in the final movie because they cut that whole basically little plot out. Wow. So now two of our suits that we worked on that we were so proud of they're not even in the film, not even referenced in the film.
Dang.
So that of course is that's like a gut punch for anybody, right? But still looking back, that's the one show that I can really think I had such a blast on. Like I was so sad when it was over because we were just hanging out all day sculpting Predators and just laughing and just carrying on. It was awesome.
That's great. That sounds like a really great work environment. I'm guessing that's not always the case on projects. So
no. Sometimes you hate every second of it. It's like
that would not be the most fun thing. So what do you still do you still have aspirations to do anything that you haven't quite gotten to do yet? Like, do you want to be one of your heroes that runs the whole special effects team? Like, what do you still hope to achieve in the field? Or are you like, no, this makes me happy, this is what I want to do, I could sculpt the rest of my life and never need to do anything else?
Well, what's funny is that's been the goal this whole time, was to just get to a point where I was respected in the sculpting department, and then you get there and you hope to like kind of reach the heights of your heroes and stuff like that, which I have a long way to go before I can do that. But once you kind of get to the big show, you go, wait a minute, like there's more we can do here. Like I have some other ideas and I kind of want to stretch out a little more. I guess the big thing, like the Man Thing situation, that would be, my ideal, like getting to be the point where I'm really taking characters, like hero characters, all the way through the process and really like one of those go-to guys, like all my heroes were in the 80s and 90s. And, really focusing on that really heavy creature effect stuff, real big, crazy monsters and stuff. Because I haven't really quite got there yet. I've had little opportunities here and there, but that's where I'm trying to go as far as sculpting and working for other productions and other shops. But I'd also like to start my own thing too, and maybe get a couple low budget gigs myself and just sort of be in charge of the process a few times too, and just sort of jump back and forth and just be as busy as I can in this business that I'm kind of obsessed with.
That's awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean that sounds like good goals to me. So then let's dive into the DNN of it all. So when how did Nora approach you? I mean, it might just be as simple as, hey, you want to do this? Yeah, let's do this. But I'm just curious as to how that process went down, because obviously I wasn't there for it, but I'm very glad that it happened.
I mean, that was basically it. Like I remember I'm like laying on the couch. It's the pandemic. I have a couple little gigs here and there. I'm doing little things that whatever I can to stay afloat. But as you know, everything just shut down. So it was just like, man, I'm kind of bored. Like, I don't know if I have too many ideas, and I'm trying to, you know, I'm sort of procrastinating on some of the stuff I already have to do, and I'm wishing for that one thing that'd be cool as hell. And of course, like, I get a little ding on my phone, and it's Nora, and she's like, "Hey, you want to do Freddy?" And I'm like, "For what?" She's like, "Oh, it's this fan film. Like, it's going to be really cool. Like, these guys are really into it, and it's going to be exciting." And I'm like, "Of course!" Like, I was just like down, like immediately. I'm like, "Yes." When, where, how? Like, how are we going to do this? And she was so jazzed about it and really excited. And I had worked with Nora at all the shops, like the LA shops before. And obviously I knew her from Face Off, and I've seen her at all the conventions, and she's such a cool person. I'm like, yeah, I would love to work with you. Let's do this. And any chance to do a Freddy, I'm totally down. And when she started talking about what you guys had discussed as far as what you wanted with the Freddy, I was like, oh yeah, like that's exactly how I would approach it if it was just completely up to me anyway. So I'm basically like, okay, so I get to do my dream Freddy, no pun intended, but like, I'm down. Like, let's do this, And that was basically it. So I met up with her a few times. We're doing like the social distance weird thing, like, because everyone was so confused at that point. We didn't know what was going on, and just picking up casts, and just bringing them back and forth to my place and her place, and she'd come pick stuff up from me. I'd go pick up stuff from her, and it was just kind of awesome. The only bummer of the whole thing was like not being able to work with her or you guys, like, together closely. So I'm basically by myself, like in my garage looking around like, man, no one's even here to enjoy this right now. Like, I'm having a blast, but it's just me. So I had all the movies on. I'm just playing the movies on loops. You know what I mean? I'm listening to all the soundtracks and just going nuts, and just like sculpting. And I was sending you guys pictures. I was sending Nora pictures. She sent them to you guys, and just getting the little notes and stuff and tweaking it. And I was just having a blast.
I can't tell you how much fun it was when those first pictures of the sculpt started to come through, and I was able to share them with Vin and with everyone around me locally here that was going to be a part of the production. I was showing them around like they were the backstage passes in Wayne's World. I was like, look, this is what our Freddy's going to look like. I was so excited, and it looked so good. And what was so great was I wanted the sunken in eye look from 2, but I wanted the sort of diamond shape of the demon Freddy, right, from Freddy versus Jason, and then the chewed up ears. And yeah, I mean, it looked so good when we got it back, and I was like, every angle of it, I was like, yeah, look, it looks great on it, and like, oh, check out the ears, and all this shit. It was so exciting. So like, how long would you say that it actually took you to make the sculpt?
That is interesting, because you don't work straight through, so it's sort of hard to like nail down how many hours it took. But I would say I think I blocked it out in like less than 10 hours. Like, just smash through it as quick as it, because that's kind of how I like to work. I like to get it out of your head as quick as possible and get it in clay, and then you can just refine from there and change whatever needs to change. But just based on those notes of like, part 2 meets, Nightmare Freddy, Demon Freddy in Freddy vs. Jason, obviously part 2, and, Kevin Yeager is like, he's like the definitive Freddy to me, even in 3, like even realized even further in 3. But part 2, he's so scary, just the way the character's even written and played in part 2 is just so like scary and visceral. And so I was trying to incorporate that stuff, stuff from Demon Freddy. And I was looking at every single one of the makeups, though, and picking out little things I like. And, of course, it's a hard gig because you have to do kind of a likeness, like a Robert Englund likeness on Dave first and then turn him into Freddy, which there's certain things that can get a little complicated. But I just kept thinking, Nora kept telling me what a great, like, Freddy Dave was, and hey, this is great, like, Robert voice and everything. And I was really excited about that. I just kept that in mind. And we just kept working to get to it. But I think it was probably like only 10 hours just to get that block out and start sending initial pictures to Nora and saying, okay, what do you think? And she's like, cool, change this, change that, maybe shorten this or shorten that or whatever. And then just keep refining. I don't know exactly at what point you guys finally got the pictures, if it was a more refined version or if it was still kind of rough. But then, all the notes that you guys have come in, which wasn't crazy, and there wasn't a ton of them, which was also great for me because it's like, okay, cool. Like, because it's hard. It's kind of like another gut punch to have to cut something completely off and start again or whatever. So it was pretty streamlined as far as I remember, and I was just having a ball with it the whole time. Then the complicated stuff starts where it's like, okay, now we got a finished design, everyone's happy. Now we have to break the makeup down, which is intense, So that's when all the technical stuff kind of comes in and gets kind of hairy. But
that is to say, you have to make it into pieces for application, correct?
Yeah. So we take the life cast of Dave first, and then we sculpt the whole realized character so you can see it completely finished. And then you have to go in and cut up the pieces, literally like removing the clay meticulously in the different pieces that will then be the final, like molded separately final prosthetics. So that becomes the real hard technical part. And because we didn't have time, we couldn't make them overlap, and mold in a certain way that was like a perfect multi-piece makeup. So we had to make everything technically generic. So every little piece could go down in whatever order as quick as possible and still blend off nice. Nora had an actual game plan the whole time, but we couldn't get everything to overlap like completely perfect. So what we had to do is, based on her game plan and how she wanted to break it down, is just do it that way. So then these pieces laid on like paper, like just right over the top of each other, and became seamless, and that's all due to her, like, perfect application and everything. And again, she would send me random pictures from when you guys were filming, and I would just get more excited because I'm like, all right, it's working. Because you never know, like, what did I screw up? What shrunk, what didn't work, and then at the end of the day, when you guys finally released the pictures of Dave in the makeup, in the lighting, everything kind of perfect, that's when I was like, all right, this is going to be sick, because then I got to see all what you guys could do, basically, and the way, the whole atmosphere, the whole thing, and him just like in the moment, I was like, holy shit, like, that was awesome.
Yeah, those images did so well for us. We raised like an additional like 25% of the budget just based on those images alone. And it was just 5 still images, and people were like, here's 10 grand more to finish the movie. And we're like, all right, sweet. So yeah, I mean,
I've got a question for you guys then, because Dave obviously understands the character, right? And he's doing a great impression, but he brings a little bit of himself to the table as well, which is really cool. But how much of him like nailing those looks, because he like will hit these like marks where that is a Robert Englund Freddy face and expression that he's doing through the makeup, which we can't control, right? If he doesn't know how to do that through the makeup, doesn't matter how cool the sculptor is, doesn't matter how good the application is. But how much of that did you guys discuss? How much of that is your influence? How much of that was just baked into Dave? Like, it's interesting.
I'll be honest, like, directing this gig was easy for me because I just managed to, like, I'm the writer and director, but I also am essentially the line producer as well. So I I've kind of assembled everything, and the overseer, as a lot of indie writer directors tend to insert themselves or assert themselves. But it's what was great was I just picked the right people and I let them do their thing. Miko, I had to direct very little because he came so prepared when we released the final table read, which we did like a week before filming. Miko was there, already. And so, like, I didn't have to do hardly anything with him. Ron Sloan and Cindy Kania both came ready to go. And so all it was just guiding, a little bit. And if there are little tweaks here and there. Dave as well, like, he wasn't the original Freddy that we had booked for the film, or that I had rather. I actually introduced. It's funny because it's a full circle thing. When I brought the script to Miko at Mad Monster Arizona 2019, I brought over the cosplayer that was going to play our Freddy just because he had a really great cosplay. And, Miko was excited enough, he's like, oh wow, yeah, he looks great and stuff. But as time went on, I could tell the dude's heart wasn't really in it, and I had seen Dave, and I knew Dave was a very talented voice actor by trade, and so he had also done like little, on his streams, he's done the Freddy voice, and he actually put out like a weird, not a weird, but he put out a random video where he like just kept himself in shadow and walked down the hallway as Freddy, and he just had the mannerisms. He knows Freddy enough that he just knew what to do. Like in that trailer shot when he rises up and he's like sloped, he's got the one shoulder down, and that shot that we did of him on the right versus New Nightmare Freddy on the left, you can see he's got that shoulder drop, and he knows how to do the movements that didn't really take any directing. There was one time that I had to rein him in because he was talking to Miko, and it sounded kind of borderline sexual, the delivery, and I was like, let's rein that in a little bit, and he's just like, oh, okay. But
cool though.
Yeah, but he's just so good at it. And like, did you get to see the introduction at Man Monster? We put that out in the.
I did, yeah.
So you got to see him in motion at least. So yeah.
Yeah, I've been kind of up on what you guys are doing. I listened to a podcast months ago too, and that's when we first started talking on Instagram, was where you kind of broke down how the whole thing came to be, and I was like, so cool to hear like everything. You guys are like such real fans, and so am I. So that's why it was such a big deal. And getting Miko is so huge. And Nora told me about that early on, but I don't know if you had nailed him down yet or what was going on. And a lot of times people say things and you're like, oh yeah, right, you're gonna get Miko. Okay, cool. Yeah, and you hope that it's gonna happen. But then when all that stuff started coming out, I'm like, wow, they really did get Miko. Like, that's nuts. And I mean, we all grew up watching him, as a kid, and just like, that was so cool to me. And you always wish that the actual sequels would do some of the stuff that you guys are doing. You get the real people, you connect them, you see them so far down the road, and that's a genius idea. So I love all that.
Well, and it was really heartening to see during the premiere, or at least after when we did the Q&A, people would raise their hand and talk about how good Miko was. And Miko was very nervous about this whole project because he hasn't acted in over 20 years. And so he was just so concerned, but he brought such an A game, and everyone was just commenting like, I was so surprised at how emotional and how engaged we were with Miko's character. And so that was really a pleasure to see him get those credits, from the actual audience. We had about 250 people at the premiere, and none of us expected that. So he was particularly nervous, but he was particularly happy with the response as well. Afterwards, he said, he's like, I know we want to make a few tweaks, but no matter what, I'm proud that we did this. Because I was nervous along the way, but he said I'm proud to have been a part of this and stuff. So that's great, and we're hoping that small audience was representative of how the reaction as a whole will be. I'm hoping so.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah, and that's kind of cool too, because I mean, I might be reading too far into it, but it almost seems like this is kind of cathartic for him in some way, because for whatever reasons he moves away from acting for so many years and then comes back and reprises his role, but does it in such a way that's like, I mean, he's really invested in this thing, and I'm honestly hoping that maybe it leads to more seeing him on screen more, just as a fan.
He's hoping so too, and he said he's already. After the trailer came out, he got a couple calls for some independent stuff. So he's like, "Yeah, the phone's starting to ring more." And I was like, "That's great. That's what I want." That if nothing else, if Miko starts to get more acting gigs as a result of this, then wonderful. And people are like, "Oh man, I want to see Dave be the new Freddy." And it's like, if nothing else, if the studio approaches Dave to audition for when Freddy reboots, that speaks to the quality too, so all of it has just been a dream. I've mentioned it before, but I just consider the project a series of wouldn't it be cool ifs that happened, and so it's great as far as that goes. So let me veer back where I won't take up too much more of your time here, but what do you think that you love most about the horror genre? I know you don't work exclusively in it, of course, on the horror show. That's what I tend to focus on. But what do you appreciate about the horror genre specifically?
I guess I love the creative side of all the stuff. I love monsters as we talked about, but I also love characters. And I think when you make a monster, you make a character, regardless if it is an icon like Freddy, or if it's something that's just monstrous like a werewolf or something like that. You're still creating a character. You're trying to get that character through. Sometimes you have dialogue to do that and storyline to do that. Sometimes you just have like those little shapes that you're making, in the sculpture to even try to get something through there. And I think fear is kind of a cool emotion to explore, and it resonates with everyone. There's something people are afraid of. So it's cool to have like kind of the ultimate art form of filmmaking where all the art forms come together to scare the hell out of someone, but to still, you're going through all the gamut of emotions at the same time, and that's a big deal. And that's what gets people kind of obsessed with it. Like we talked about earlier, there's things that scared the shit out of us as kids, we become obsessed with later. And after, 100+ years of this whole film process, if you can still scare somebody and you can still entertain someone and like something resonates with them, that's a big deal. Like that's pretty huge. And that's why I love horror. And you know I very rarely see things that like really get me these days because I feel like I've seen so many horror movies, but I'm like trying to be open and really appreciate everything. Like even like the worst low budget schlock goofy stuff is fun, and that maybe doesn't scare you, and you don't have an emotional charge from it, but you still have a great time with it. That's why I love this genre. And you know me and my wife go through all the old full moon movies constantly. I mean, we just have so much fun with them. We're watching Baby Oopsie the other day
Yeah.
and having a blast with that. Like it's a great time, and there's so much fun to be had with all that. And then every once in a while, something hits you really hard. Like Robert Eggers' The Witch was a big deal to me. I was like, well, this is a film. Like this is a piece of artwork, and I was obsessed with the attention to detail to that in a completely different way. So it's like that's the cool thing about the genre. Like you can get a bunch of different types of comedies, but as far as like horror, there's like the spectrum is insane of what you're watching, and I think it's all kind of fun. So
I agree. That's actually a good segue into the rapid fire question I have for you. We're down to the last three. The last two are very quick and easy, but I want to get your rapid fire thoughts on each of the subgenres. So we've obviously touched on monster movies, creature features. You love those. So just real quick, doesn't have to be long, however long you want to talk about it, but just your yays or nays for these subgenres. So slashers.
I love slashers. I mean, I love all of them. It's like I think it's highly regarded with most people as like not that difficult, right? Oh yeah, slashers, whatever. I'm like, I disagree completely. Like I think it's a hard thing to do, and it's a hard thing to do right. And again, looking back, I had like my issues with. Let's just take the Friday franchise. Obviously there are some sequels that are way better than the others, and but looking back now, how do you not love every single one of those movies? And I do a podcast with my friends. It's called Shindig Radio. It's connected to our Halloween Shindig. It's this kind of comprehensive list of Halloween playlist like songs basically on the internet. So check that out. But we talk about this constantly. It's like if you go back and watch 8 and 5 and all those Friday movies that everyone can agree are the worst, they're still so fun. Like how do you not have fun with that stuff now looking back on it? And it's the same thing with Nightmare, same thing with all the Halloweens. It's like I love this genre. I love slashers. So how do you not have fun with it? And then every once in a while, a new cool one comes out. Like the Terrifier series comes out. I'm a huge fan of The Hills Run Red, Dave Parker's, the baby face character. I just think that's like a kind of overlooked slasher icon almost immediately, and like stuff like that. It's like, what's not to love.
I specific yeah, along those lines, I thought a nice it was one of the few movies, or one of the earlier movies, that blended found footage and regular films. Leslie Vernon,
Oh yeah.
Excellent slasher movie that is like gives you a behind the scenes to a slasher while giving you a slasher movie in the back half. So I agreed. It's like you said, you can do so many different things under the horror umbrella. It's refreshing all along the way. Paranormal movies.
I love paranormal movies. I'm more of like a traditionalist as far as like I love Poltergeist. You know what I mean? I like Ghost Story. You know what I mean? I like that some of the '80s stuff. As far as some of the like the found footage style stuff they started doing kind of later, it's not my bag. But at the same time, it's a big deal, and those movies made tons of money and kind of created a subgenre within a subgenre, which is pretty awesome too. But I mean, I love anything ghost story. I like Amityville style, and Amityville sort of like blends the lines of slashers and haunted house vibe, which is pretty cool. But I don't know if this is leaving the subgenre in any way, but anything Satan-y is awesome to me too. Like
Religious was next, yeah. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So I kind of those kind of cross over for me too, like
Mm-hmm.
the religious aspect, the ghost aspect, like stuff like that. And to me, it's like, how do you miss with that? You know what I mean? Like scary people in cloaks. I mean, that's my favorite thing.
Well, did you get are the like the Conjuring, Insidious movies? Do you like those, or are those too kind of Hollywoody? Not quite as 80s.
Yeah, they're sort of hit or miss. It's for me just because I'm a little purist about certain things, but to me, those movies, the best things about those movies are how they reference all my favorite movies. So I go, okay, cool, you guys love Poltergeist too. You know what I mean? Or cool, you love that Exorcist. It's like I totally get it, and I love the popularity of it, but for me, the go-to is to go back to the Poltergeist movies and stuff. You know what I mean? Like that's me. I'm not a big remake fan either. When it comes to that stuff, but I like that they're keeping it fresh, like, and they're keeping the whole genre alive. I love that aspect of it. But there's been a couple cool things in like the Conjuring universe and stuff, even down to scenes that I'm like, wow, that's pretty sick. Actually, that's kind of cool. I like the kind of religious crossover with that first Nun movie,
Yeah.
which I thought was pretty neat. Because that, to me, what I don't even know if it's intentional, but it seems like they're looking at cool like Italian horror, and they're doing that kind of gothic Italian horror thing at the same time too.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's accidental or if it's just me like looking into it, but I would hope that they're like referencing some of that stuff too, which is pretty badass.
Yeah, no, I agree with there. Sci-fi horror. I know you worked on The Predator, so you're not against it, but how do you feel about it overall?
Oh, I love it. I mean, I just like sci-fi, in general, but the sci-fi horror aspect means like you're probably going to get some sick creatures with that too,
Mm-hmm.
which is awesome. And anyone in a rubber suit is cool. I'm totally down with that. Again, I always gravitate to like the 80s, but the 90s, there's so many great things too. And I kind of love every subgenre of this stuff, especially when it's usually tacked on to cool special effects.
Yeah. Yeah, the one I find that people tend to not necessarily jive with a lot is the found footage. That can go either way. I love found footage movies, but they are very samey a lot of times. So the ones that do it well and do it different, those particularly stand out. The only other one that I was really going to hit on was horror comedy, because that's a particular sort of subgenre as well that I think has its place, but not necessarily my favorite.
Again, I think it's more difficult to do than people think, right? Is like, injecting comedy into actual horror. But there's been great examples of that, in the past, and some of them accidental, honestly, and I love that too. I love that kind of camp. I think now there's sort of this push to like inject camp instead of like, if you arrive at camp like it's like a kind of sort of an accident, that's so much more fun to me than, and it's almost like you don't even know, you're not even in on your own joke, but if you're trying to inject that part of it and it's not the same, it's like you're kind of crowbarring it in where it doesn't really belong and it feels kind of forced. But for the most part, I still love the idea of horror comedy and like monster comedy. Just going back to found footage real quick too, I think you can do that so well, but it's also really hard to do. Like, it's like, just because you're going handheld doesn't mean this is like a good found footage, But I love when it serves the storyline like you say, Hills Run Red, and I also like, Cannibal Holocaust. That's like, to me, one of the first times you do something like that. I know it's just, a plot point in the movie to serve the rest of the story, but that stuff is like so real and scary and visceral, and I think it really does the job in like eliciting like that kind of disgusted emotional response they're looking for. But I was just talking to my wife about this. I love Sacrament, Ty West Sacrament.
Oh yeah.
I think that was expertly done, like technically, but it's also such a good film at the same time. You're not just running around with handheld, and then it goes, okay, we don't have to have a story here or anything like that. I really like that one. So I think it can be done well. I usually don't like it if it's gimmicky. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so last couple questions, very easy. First one is for any aspiring sculptors or makeup effects artists. Do you have any recommendations or tips or tricks on what they should do to try and make themselves get into a place where they're becoming a household name like you are?
I'm trying, yeah. It's actually a lot easier than people think, as far as just try to get better at what you want to do. Like, learn about it. You have to kind of know. If you don't know the top 5 companies out there in the field that you want to be in, then you need to do your research. And if you want to sculpt, if you want to do makeup, if you want to paint, whatever you want to do, if you want to do a little of everything, you just got to just start. I don't think there's a school to go to or a better place to learn than just the internet. Like, just look things up, grab some materials, get the cheapest ones you can, and just start just going nuts. Start sculpting, start trying to make a mask or something. And there's tons of great, appliances and stuff out there if you just want to start jumping into makeup yourself. But just the more you do it, the better you're going to be, obviously. And if you do 10 sculptures, you're 10 times better a sculptor than you were. So there you go. And you just keep moving. But that awareness of the companies and what's out there in the industry is important, because those are the people you're going to literally be working for. So you get those phone numbers, start calling them, and just immediately start. Like, start today. Like, don't even wait till I'm not good enough or whatever else. Like, that doesn't really work that way. You got to just get in there and start working,
All right, right on. And then finally, what you touched on the Instagram, you touched on the podcast. Is there anything that you think people should keep an eye out for? I know generally you have to be kind of hush-hush about things until the film comes out, but is there anything that you can let people know to look forward to, or would you rather them just go check out the podcast and the Instagram?
Well, definitely check out the Instagram. That's usually the best way to contact me or to see what I'm up to, usually. And check out Nightmare Force Masks. I think it's just nightmareforcemasks.com, or check them out on Instagram as well. It's my buddy Josh's company again. So they're going to be rebooting the whole website and getting ready for this Halloween. So that's going to be a pretty big explosion. Tons of new stuff, new masks and stuff on the market for that. And definitely check out HalloweenShindig.com and Halloween Shindig on Instagram, and check out Shindig Radio, which is our podcast. And we talk more about Freddy than probably anything else. We have like a whole Freddy Monster Raps episode where we discuss not only the important, Fat Boys and, Will Smith Freddy raps, but the 10 plus other Freddy raps that came out at that same time that nobody even knows about. So just ridiculous stuff like that,
I'll go check that out for sure. Because we made a song for the soundtrack, the closing credits, that was inspired by the interactivity of Freddy from those old songs. So we had
That's
Dave
so
do
awesome.
some lines for our song too. It's pretty fun.
We will probably throw that on the Shindig playlist at some point, because that's my buddy Derek Reynolds. He runs the whole thing. My other buddy Graham is another effects guy and the three of us are constantly doing the show. That's our thing. We're obsessed with title tracks. If you have a title track in your movie, that's like the greatest thing ever. So anything, especially with Freddy in it, we're in.
We just released our mashup of Dream Warriors and Running from This Nightmare, and it's been getting some good response. So we tried to do well with the music.
That's so cool. I have to check that out because I did see it on your YouTube, but I need to check that out, man. That's awesome. We love that.
Right on. Well, thank you very much for joining me, Mikey. I greatly appreciate you taking the time. Thank you to all of our viewers for watching up until this point. We greatly appreciate that as well. Make sure you go and check out everything that Mikey's got going on. But yeah, Mikey, thank you again for coming on. I greatly appreciate it.
No, thank you so much, and congratulations. I know how hard that probably was, but you got it, and it's ready to go. And I can't wait for everyone else to see it too. So we're pretty. Thank you. Thanks for letting me be a part of it too.
Thank you for being a part of it. It made it all the better. So much appreciated. And thank you to all of our patrons for supporting the channel the way that you do. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you as well. Until next time, I've been Cecil Laird. That's been Mikey Rotella. And remember, guys, stay scared.